you what they said, and then we'll give you a little bit of our perspective on that.
We also gave the option of telling us what we did right and what we did wrong, but they wouldn't do as parents. And I don't know if someone paid them off because they didn't list anything that we did wrong. And I know we did pretty wrong.
Yes.
But anyway, the good news is they're all talking to each other and they're still talking to us. So we call that a win.
And they're all Catholic, raising their kids or grandkids Catholic. So, like I said, they're great. I'm not really sure how we made it there, but we're going to kind of walk through some of those key points. So if you're curious, this is the last wedding we had in our family. So the two there in the middle, the bride and the groom, that's our middle daughter, Hannah, and her new husband, Brad. She is now expecting baby number 1. So that will be grandchild number 7. 8, sorry, 8. I'm losing track. And then all the rest of them are family members from aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, in-laws, outlaws. That's basically the family there.
So that's actually my mom and dad, the older couple there, and they had 4 children, and their 4 children are still practicing Catholicism, as you can tell, like rabbits. We multiply very well. So they're probably, mom and dad are up to like 29 grandkids, and about half of those are married, and we're probably missing a good third because just not everybody can come to weddings on the weekend. So it's in order to get the children to smile for the good picture, they're promised that they always get to do a goofy picture. So that's the only way we can get them to smile in the first one that they put on Facebook up there.
Nice. What happened there is okay.
Whoa, who's that? Is that you?
Is that the first one? Yes. Okay. So a little bit of the backstory. So I met Laura in college. I had spent several years in the Marine Corps, U.S. Marine Corps, and then went to college and met Laura there. And we were actually friends for about 8 years before I convinced her to marry me. And it only took us about 6 months once we started dating for me to convince her that we were going to get married. And we've been married now for 29 years. Like I said, four children, all of them are adults. The youngest is 21, the oldest is 31, and 7 grandkids and 1 on the way. Those are the oldest 4 grandkids in the picture on the lower side. And one of the things that I think we wanted to kind of ask is, so when we first got married, we were open to children. That's the way that we were raised. What about you guys? What are your thoughts about children and raising children as Catholics? And same thing for the people out on Zoom. Anybody has any thoughts, or they want to ask any questions about that? What are your thoughts about bringing children into the world and raising children? Anyone?
It's quite exciting. You do not actually know what you should expect. Yeah, more or less.
Well, I have a question because I think it is sometimes it can be quite a challenge because I can imagine that you both are American, or where are you from?
Yes.
Right. So I think when it's 2 different nationalities, it can be maybe a challenge with the language, maybe that you say, okay, what is the language that I want to use with my children? Or maybe there's maybe a tendency that the woman says, okay, I teach in my way. And the father says, I teach in my way, So maybe to find the consensus a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. And I'm going to say that even both being from one country, that doesn't change that challenge. Everybody comes from a different background with a different viewpoint. And in-laws that'll always tell you that it's better to do it this way than the way you want to do it, or even your own family. And so that's something that we found we had to come together on. And I'll admit that when we first got married, actually before we even started dating, while I had been raised Catholic, I really wasn't practicing Catholic. And if anybody knows Spanish, I had my grandmother who didn't speak English. She only spoke Spanish, and she had a phrase that she used that described where I was in my position, that I was católica de la lengua para afuera. That means I was Catholic from the tip of the tongue on out. I wasn't practicing my faith, but I was Catholic because my parents were Catholic. Right? And so I learned pretty quickly, because Laura was pretty stern, that she said, I'm not going to marry you if you're not Catholic. And my answer was, I am Catholic.
Yeah.
And she said, when was the last time you went to church? I'm like, is that important? Right. So as far as I was concerned, I look back on my childhood and how my parents raised me, and even my grandparents, and I see there was a benefit to being raised in a Catholic family, and I wanted that for my children. And so I made concessions in order to make that happen. And it really wasn't concessions, it would just be coming back to my faith. So I don't think different, being from different countries, I think it's more that you're just different. Then there's a lot of difference in this, and it's not going to be all happy. I look back now and I see all the happy times that we had, but trust me, going through that, it was not all happy. There was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of discussion, and then agreeing on how this was going to happen.
Well, and I think you have to have this talk with your fiance ahead of time. I mean, you need to know now if your fiance wants children or doesn't want children. You need to know if, some people were raised with very harsh, surroundings, and, are you going to, raise your children together? Because you have to be a united front with the children. Because once you have 2 kids, their main purpose in life is to divide and conquer you. And they will do that. They will try. They come to me and they're like, Mom, can I do such and such? I'm like, no, you can't. Well, I expect that to be the answer. Well, then 30 minutes later, they go to him. And the first time he said, yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm like, you can't. And so he learned very quickly. It's like, what did your mother say? So you have to be together. And, so like I said, don't let the kids divide and conquer you, because that's why God sent them to you, to see He's going to test you.
And by the time the third one comes along, you're outnumbered. So.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on children, or even just the way you were raised? I mean, were you raised with children? I was raised with a lot of kids. He wasn't. I don't think you ever changed a diaper until
I got married.
Yeah.
Maybe you can ask some of the people.
Yeah. Anybody on the Zoom?
Can begin with Madalena then.
I can't see names. My friends. Are they muted?
They hear you, but of course,
Okay.
they unless you can unmute themselves.
Okay.
Bill, so if anybody has any of those questions, if you just want to jump in and ask, I don't want this to be just us going through the slides. Interrupt us at any time. I don't think either one of us have a problem with being interrupted. So if you have a question, don't wait till the end. Don't wait till the end of the slide, just ask. And I'm going to try, as we continue through this, to also ask questions, try to get some, if you guys have something, try to draw it out. So anyway, that's us. Let's see. So these are our children. We have 4 kids, 3 daughters, 1 boy. As you can imagine, the boy is a handful. He always was. Our oldest is Stephanie. And you can't figure it out. She's the shortest of the group. Our oldest daughter is the shortest. Timothy is number 2. He's the tallest. And then Hannah is the one on the bottom there in the maroon or the reddish colored shirt. And then Monica is the baby at 21. She's the one in the pink shirt on the bottom.
And Stephanie's the only one pregnant in that picture.
Yes.
This was them making fun of Stephanie, and of course,
Right.
whatever Timothy's doing.
So like I said, we asked the kids these questions. We said, what did we do right? And what did we do wrong? And we wanted some feedback. And so what we're going to start doing is we're going to start going through some of the feedback there, and kind of give you their opinions of us.
Well, let me say this, one of the things when we were engaged, like I said, we knew each other for 8 years, and I really dodged him a lot because I didn't see him being good father material or husband material. When we first met, he told me that the Marine Corps was always going to come first in his life, and some wife better get used to him. I questioned him and I said, does the Marine Corps come before God? And he said, okay, fine. God first, then the Marine Corps, then my family. And I'm like, okay.
And what was it that I said? If the Marine Corps had wanted me to have a wife, they would have issued me one.
Anyway, so 7.5 years later, he wanted to start dating, going out. He goes, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, you're not Catholic. It was very important to me to be. And of course, he said, yes, I am. My dog tags prove it. And I said, well, you don't go to confession, you don't go to church. And I said, look, I don't want to be that woman who has children and I go to mass by myself. I don't want the kids saying, well, how come daddy gets to stay home watching football and soccer? And so he said, he goes, well, I am Catholic. And I said, well, you're not. And so about 3 months later, maybe 2 months later, he came back and he said, you want to go out? He said, you're not Catholic. He goes, how do you know? And so I started listing it again. He goes, I went to confession 2 months ago. He goes, I've been going to mass regularly. And I go, how come you didn't tell me? And he goes, well, it's none of your business. And I'm like, first time he put me in my place more or less. And it was like, I realized then that he was taking his faith more important, because it was between him and God. So we got married. And before that, I was testing him and I'm like, so how many children do you want to have, And he kind of looks at me, he goes, how about a boy and a girl? And I'm like, yeah, we have no control over that, And he's like, okay. He goes, 2 would be nice. And I said, well, the Catholic Church, doesn't want us to use birth control. He goes, and we will never do that. And so it was kind of testing it because I knew he didn't know a lot about the teachings of the church. And anyway, so talking about ahead of time, I knew that he wanted to be a father. And at that point, he goes, I'm open to as many children as God will give us. It's like, okay. So, he gave us 4. And I'm pretty happy with those 4.
Yeah, they turned out okay.
Sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
So thank you, I'm Emanuela, and I'm wondering how you were able, because I understood that Laura is not a Catholic, so how you are both Catholic?
Yeah.
Sorry, because my question was more like, if one of the 2 is not Catholic, how we can respect this, and but at the same time give. Because I am Catholic, so how can I educate, let's say, or bring this faith to the children, but leave them the choice? Because that's not the only way.
Right. Well, that's a good
Because
question.
they have the example of 2 parents that they will have 2 different ideas and under the religion point of view. So.
It's a good
How
question.
you would
It's tough because if you're hearing someone who comes from a Protestant faith or just a non-faith, there's things as a Catholic that we promise we're going to do. And normally at your wedding vows, when you're standing on the altar, the priest will ask you, are you going to be open to children? Are you going to raise your children Catholic? And this is the discussion you have to have with the person if you're marrying someone, if this is something they're willing to do. This is part of the give and take. And as a Catholic, for me, I wasn't willing to give up any of my Catholic faith. When we go on vacation, we find a church that's, on a Saturday or Sunday because I don't want to miss my obligation. And so he knew that. And I'm also going to say, once we got married and he started reading all of these Scott Hahn books and he started delving into phrase sheets, theology of not theology, but Catholicism. He's a much better Catholic than I am because he remembers it. And it was just wonderful because I needed that. I needed someone who was going to help me grow as a Catholic. But you definitely need to have that because in some instances you can't compromise. You and I don't know what you're pro-life, but with the subject of abortion, there's a lot of women who get pregnant even in a married life, and one of the spouses, whether it's the man or the woman, says, I'm not ready to be a mom. Well, you can't ever, commit that atrocity, because you're taking the life of someone. So, that's something you need to discuss. And I would hope that you would, talk about what's important in your Catholic faith. And obviously, your fiance loves you, and I would think that he's going to maybe learn some more about it. And it doesn't have to be a conversion, but it's definitely going to be a healthy respect for your faith.
Yeah, I'll say that there, like we said a little while ago, there has to be a united front. If this is going to be, if a difference in faith is going to be something that is going to cause a problem raising the children, then figuring this out before the children show up is something that as parents you need to figure out, as opposed to waiting until the child is there and then trying to work this out, which I think would probably only confuse the children more. But having that discussion ahead of time, at least in my mind, would be the prudent thing. I would hope, as a Catholic, that maybe your spouse would be amenable to raising the children Catholic, but that's something that needs to be worked out between you and your spouse.
Okay, yeah, because my concern is mainly when you are a child and you don't fully understand why you have to go to the church and spend 1 hour there, or you do to the catechism, and sometimes it's difficult for a child really foresee what is the benefit of this, because it didn't develop a spirituality or a system of values that can agree on that is maybe or not, so can share or not share Catholic values. So I think that I don't know what is, like, not the right thing, but how actually being able to respect the freedom of the child and to show him other possibilities other than the Catholic religion, and then let him choose or her choose, or just do like my parents did in Italy, like you have to go to the church and that's not questionable.
Yeah.
I encourage you also read lives of some of these wonderful saints, men and women who were married to a spouse. Some of them were like hostile to the Catholic faith, and many of these men and women overcame that. And sometimes they converted their spouse, but at all times, I think the Catholic spouse was keeping their spouse in mind, trying to help them, get to heaven and to lead a good life. And if you have two different faiths, there's nothing that says that you can't go celebrate, your spouse's faith. Now, you always have to, go to your Catholic church every, Sunday as an obligation, but you can definitely show your love to your spouse and go to his synagogue or go to his church wherever he is.
But let me address that, because you had asked about, raising the children in the Catholic faith and respecting their decision to make a choice. So I don't have a right answer. What I have is an answer that worked for us, right? And we were both Catholic, and so our intention was to raise our children Catholic. And I didn't really give my children a choice. Children are not fully formed until they're much older. So my kids followed my rules. Remember your parents, you're under my roof, it's my rules, that kind of thing. And so we insisted that our children go to Mass every Sunday with us. When we're on vacation, we took them to Mass. They made confession once they were of the proper age, and communion, and they went to the religious education. All of that, whether they enjoyed it or not, was not the question. It was a requirement that we had of our children. Now, I will tell you, it seems to have worked. All of our kids are very strong in their faith. They've learned a lot about the Catholic faith throughout their years as they were growing. And all of them are raising our grandkids Catholic now. And they've married Catholic spouses, right? So is that the right answer? I can't say that it is. And is it a formula that'll work when you don't have a spouse that's Catholic? That's it. You start adding more things like that in. I just can't really, I don't have the perfect answer for you, but it definitely say that no matter how you work it out, communication is the most important thing. You have to have these conversations before the children start arriving so that you and your spouse are on the same page. Whether it's, we're going to raise all these children Catholic and you both agree, or whether you're going to come up with some kind of formula that's going to allow them to experience both faiths, and then somehow guide them to a decision. The thing to remember is that you've got to make those decisions ahead of time, and you have to make the decision with the children's best interest in mind, not the, I'm right, I want the children raised the way I was raised.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, I couldn't, I mean, and that's the thing.
No, I know that is a tricky question also, because I guess it's also, we are also talking about the freedom of other people. Children it's not that they are not free, and it's good for me, because for me I didn't have choice, in the sense that I grew up in a society before the family. I mean, before in a family, but then also in a society, because in my city everyone of my age were Catholic. I mean, I didn't see other than this until I moved. So for me, it was very the normality, let's say, something obvious. While for my children, probably is completely another reality. And so, but since I had my doubts, I solved my doubts in Catholicism, and now I'm Catholic, and my faith, I can say, is strong. I would love that actually they will get the opportunity to understand why, for me, this is the truth, let's say, but I want also to leave them the choice. So that's the thing that I'm struggling a bit. I mean, not now, but it's, so
thank you for your advice.
I also want to add something. Like you're talking about, I want to raise my kids as how, just like how I raised. But the thing is, for someone like me, I am Catholic now, but like, I wasn't raised Catholic. I was only converted when I was actually 4 years ago. So like I don't even have that experience. And my grandparents were Catholic and great-grandparents were Catholic, but they didn't raise my father, for example, Catholic. So the thing is, they had 4 children, but only one of them, my aunt, became Catholic later in life. So like I don't have the experience of growing up Catholic as a child. I had like a lot of friends who were Catholic and Protestant, so that was probably only my like references growing up. But yeah, I think it's, and like for my husband, he's not even like religious, so I think it's more challenging for a couple like us when we don't even have any idea how to raise a kid in like guidance, spirituality, and any of that thing. So I think it's a lot.
It is, and there's no, like you said, there's no one answer. I would encourage you to read good books on Catholic faith. Fathers should be able to.
And we have some in the reference that we're going to do.
We should always be striving to learn more about your faith. You know, it's not just something that you're born with and that you live all the time. You know, 2 of my children have a lot more Catholic knowledge about like theology of the body than I was ever taught. And you know, just kudos to them and to you also for converting and having that call. I've told them several times, if I had to be born in the Catholic Church, I don't think I would. I really don't. So I think it's an arduous journey.
And I would even encourage, I mean, even if you're not Catholic, just to read about some of the Catholic faith. If you have this discussion ahead of time and you decide that there is some benefit to raising your children in the Catholic Church, and also just I think it shouldn't be any surprise, but if you were married in the Catholic Church, there was a vow taken to raise the children Catholic. So learning about the Catholic faith doesn't necessarily mean that you have to convert, but you understand where the Catholic faith is coming from and how that is applied to children. So, and there's a lot of really good books written by saints that weren't Catholic, and their struggles, you know, that eventually led them there. And even non-saints, I would say probably one of the best that's modern would be the Scott Hahn books. If you read any books from Scott Hahn, he struggled against the Catholic faith. And he was angry because the more that he learned about the Catholic faith, the more he realized that he was wrong, but he was angry about it because he had been raised outside of it. And it's actually, his best book is called Rome Sweet Home. And it's a very good book of conversion to the Catholic faith. But even if that's not, where you want to go, just reading what other people have struggled with is good too. Yep. All right. Yeah, move on to the next one here. All right. So this is our daughter Stephanie. She is she studied music in college, and she is very verbose, as you can tell from the writing there. But her take, when we asked, so what is it that you remember about being raised by us, or what did we do wrong? And one of the things that she had to mention is this quote right here, is that just us living the example of husband and wife in a Catholic faith, that I supported her, she supported me. We both went to mass together. We would go to confession, and it wasn't just our Catholic faith, but it was enjoying each other's company. I always enjoyed the outdoors, and Laura comes along, and I think that if something were ever to happen to me, she would probably never go hiking, backpacking, scuba diving, or any of that again. But she does it, I think, because you enjoy hanging with me, maybe.
I don't like putting the tents up, and all this stuff. He does everything.
But the point here that she's making is that, yes, we're husband and wife, but we're also very good friends. We enjoy spending time with each other. We enjoy doing things with each other. And now we're out here in Europe by ourselves with our kids and grandkids. And we're working from the house, and we see each other every day. We're there all day long, because, that are married, that is. And it's still working after 29 years. So I think that's probably the main thing here that Stephanie was talking about with her marriage as a covenant. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things that Scott Hahn said is that the love that you see with the Father and the Son, there is the Holy Spirit that comes from the love of the Father and Son, and he compares that to a husband and wife. Husband and wife, they love each other, and 9 months later, you have to give the love a name, And one of the best things we say to your child is that, or one thing that you can do for your child is to give your child other siblings, if you have that chance. And for him, my children always saw him sacrifice. It wasn't always, we never condoned, we never went into the 50-50. He had to give 50, I have to give 50. You have to give 100%. And sometimes he would give 120%, and I would take a lot. But as the head of the family, he did the sacrificing. There's a lot of times he died himself, especially when you're in the hospital watching your wife give birth to a 9-pound bowling ball. You have to be the strong one. Even though the wife might be suffering, you can't do it. And what men like to do is they like to protect, they like to help, they like to fix things. And there's no fixing, and so, you can see the suffering of them, okay, you can't do anything else. So just remembering that, so many times he's kind of died to self, for me. And, when you see that and your kids see that, they understand what a good marriage is. And, sometimes mom's not always the nicest person, and he puts up with it, and he just calms mom down and takes her out to eat or something. I didn't work outside the home. I took care of the kids and I actually homeschooled them also, which sometimes when he came home, he would actually call about 10 minutes. He's like, how did your day go? And if it was good, he would always, come in cheerful and stuff. And it was him preparing to find out if I had a bad day.
That was so I could stop and buy some roses and wine on my way home. So I think that was the main thing here with Stephanie, is just the example of husband and wife is what she feels was the biggest thing for her. And like I said, Stephanie's our oldest. She's got 4 kids of her own, and doing her own thing as a mother also. So our son Timothy, he's number 2, but this is actually, we asked the in-laws too. So this is actually,
May I make a suggestion?
yes.
I think it would be good to read the thing. Maybe somebody can read it out loud for you, because
Okay.
they see it better. And then maybe the last who came as a punishment. Can you read that?
Lane, what I noticed first about Tim, aside from his goofy smile, is that he would silently and simply make the sign of the cross. Bow his head and say grace before he ate. Always right in the middle of the university cafeteria. The one action spoke volumes about his character and upbringing. There was only one of his friend group to do that. His faith was his own, an integral part of who he was. It immediately made me ask myself why I wasn't doing that. I'm Catholic also. I knew I wanted to become friends with Tim because knowing him would help me become a better version of myself. Coming closer to Tim would bring me closer to God. That was something my confused soul was longing for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So like I said, this is, so Lainey, Timothy is our son, that's him, and Lainey is his wife that he met in college. And we always, when we would go out to dinner, we always, as a family, at our heads, made the sign of the cross and prayed over our meals as a family. And there were several times that I could tell that, especially as my kids started getting into the middle school age, that was kind of like, why are we doing this? Everybody's looking at us. But we insisted. And it seems to have stuck because all of our kids, to them, it doesn't feel right unless they actually say their prayers. And it was more than just grace before meals. We said prayers as a family. There were, not every night, but there were several times that we would say a rosary in the evening as a family. And again, this was not an option for the kids. We now do it with our grandkids. And I'll tell you, you get into the second decade and the wiggles start, and it's a lot to calm kids down. And in fact, I remember holding my second grandkid, Genevieve, and holding her to keep her still while we're trying to say the rosary because she was moving and she didn't want to stay here. And it was just this is important as a family. We're a family that prays together and you're going to participate. And so now our children are like that with their children. And so I guess really the takeaway here is that I want to encourage you that, again, this is part of the conversation is part of being Catholic is praying, showing your children that you go to Mass and you pray the rosary at night, you pray the grace before meals, and any of the other prayers, and you help your children during the religious education to learn these shared prayers that are part of our Catholic tradition. I know that a lot of my Protestant friends like the impromptu prayer, where they just say, and that's fine too, but there are traditional Catholic prayers that are good to memorize, because that becomes part of your Catholic family. I can't tell you now, since we've started traveling, we've lived in Sydney, Australia for a couple of years. We visited several South Pacific islands. We've been to Malta and several other countries here in Europe. And no matter what the language is that they're saying Mass in, we know the prayers and we follow along. And we may not be able to understand what the priest is saying during the homily, but we know what part of the Mass we're in. We know what the English prayers are, and we just say them quietly underneath our breath as everybody else is reciting theirs. And so to us, the Mass is universal. It doesn't matter where in the world we are, we can go to Mass. Did I miss anything?
I was gonna say, our kids saw us go to confession. And when we go to confession, we would take everybody, they would have to sit in the pews while Dad ran in, and then he would watch them when I would go in. And if there wasn't a long line, the confessionals in America are quite a bit different. The ones I've seen here, where the priest is in the middle, the outside is very visible. You still have the screen that you can see the person standing there. In America, you actually go into a room, you close the door, and sometimes it can be a little bit frightening. But I would ask Father's permission. I would say, can my son come in and say hello or get a blessing? And I made sure no one else was waiting in line. I would take my kids into confessional. They would see the parish priest sitting there. Father would say, hi, Timothy, hi, Stephanie, and, you know, go about their way. One of the funny stories I had is teaching my children how to go to confession and prayers. And Hannah, usually you go to confession at the age of 7 or 8 when you first come to go to confession. Well, Hannah was our precocious child, and after Mass one time, I had one time talked to a priest and I said, Timothy needs to go to confession. Can you hear him? Okay.
But he had to go to confession quite a bit.
A couple months later, you know, we're standing there talking to everybody, and Hannah is gone. She's disappeared. And I can't find Hannah. Anyway, she comes walking out of the confessional. She's 4. I said, Hannah, I said, you should go to confession. I was telling Father what Timothy did. Timothy needs to go to confession. Okay, so.
Father did let us know that Hannah did a very good confession for Timothy.
And of course, he said this in front of Timothy, and Timothy's looking like, he goes, she can go to confession for me.
So this is, again, this is Stephanie with our 4 grandkids, and if we want someone to read through this.
We were always encouraged to go one step further than our peers, not to be better than them, but to be better ourselves. He taught us to help with dishes after dinner at friends' houses, clean up our messes at grandparents', assist relatives carrying the groceries, come downstairs and greet guests. Eventually, he did not have to ask this, but it was ingrained for us to do better and love better for the sake of the good and the right ones of us.
So we had rules for our kids. They had chores, and they were expected to do these. And it wasn't just the chores, there was respect that was expected of our children. We had a number of older aunts and uncles. And when they came over, our children were expected to greet them, to shake their hand, and to have a conversation with them. Short. It was short, but you had to at least acknowledge and walk up and say hello and so, how are you doing? You know, and there was no, I'm just gonna go hide in my room and read my book or listen to the music. And trust me, this was harder than I make it sound. All right, but we insisted on it, and it got to the point where at a certain age, it just kind of kicked in, and the kids knew this was what was expected, and I'm not going to get out of it, so I'm just going to start doing it. All of the kids, even starting, when did they start unloading dishes?
Oh, 3 years old.
3, 4. Yeah. So, you know, she would prepare meals every night. I'd come home, we'd set the table, we'd get everything ready. And when the dinner was done, there was nothing for us to do. We expected the kids to clear the table, load the dishes, sweep the floor, put everything away, and then we could go watch TV or do whatever we were going to do for the evening. And this was kind of just, I mean, I'm not really sure where this came from, because I can tell you, being raised by a Hispanic mother, I was never allowed to do any of that. All right. I think maybe you were raised a little stricter than that. But I see now, looking back, with that emphasis of this is a family, and we all contribute to the family. It doesn't matter whether you're 30 or you're 3, you're going to contribute using whatever talent you can. It pretty much has made my kids realize that they're part of this family, even now that they're 30, 21, 22, you know, whatever their age. They still talk to each other. They still have discussions. When we come back to the States, everybody wants to come back and visit. And it's because they have that shared upbringing. It wasn't well, my daughter was raised over here and my son did this and nobody helped out with this. And mom made the meals and cleaned and did everything. And then everybody went to their room and watched TV. Our kids never had TVs in their bedrooms. All right. So was this something that we consciously thought about doing? I think it's just something that kind of fell into place because once you get to 4 kids, it's a constant mess and we needed help. And the older kids were much better at helping than the younger kids. And so we just kind of happened that way.
We wanted our children to be kind, and I don't know if you guys have siblings, but some of the hardest people to be nice to is your siblings. And one of the things that I came up with another sister-in-law is that when one of my children was really ugly to another kid, the mean kid had to take over the chores of the kid they had victimized. Boy, that didn't take very long for them to like, and I'm not gonna discuss, Stephanie had bigger chores, and so the kids started being, a little bit nicer to each other instead of saying, okay, I don't want to do this. So we stressed kindness, it didn't always work, I remember even just more recently, right after Tim was married, some parents don't admonish their children, when they get older. And I told Bill, I said, no, I'm going to admonish Timothy. Timothy came over with his wife, Lady, and it was New Year's Eve, and everyone was inside the kitchen doing something. And right at midnight, Timothy had walked into the kitchen, poured just himself and Lady a glass of champagne, and walked into the living room and ignored everybody else. But he was ticked off at one of his sisters. Well, when I heard about it the next day, I didn't chew him out, but I wrapped my finger and I said, you don't do that. I said, you're 25 years old. I said, I'm sorry you were mad at him. I said, but you just really were real snot, not giving everybody the champagne and sticking your nose up in and rolled his eyes, but he did go apologize. The hand that he didn't do it for, but again, he was 25, but I saw an instant where it's like, all right, who's this Yahoo? Who's not being very nice. And so I whacked my finger at him because that's what moms do.
You're going to find the theme that Timothy and Hannah, being the 2 middle kids, even today, they're still at each other and they're both married.
This is our baby.
This is the baby, Monica.
You want to do that?
My friends' mothers made their lunches, cleaned their rooms, washed their clothes, did all their chores at home. They let me talk back. When I visited friends and stayed for dinner, I always said, thank you, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And I offered to help clean up after dinner. Every parent was surprised when I asked if I could help clean up. I didn't do it for points, but I was taught.
Same message.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the previous message. We expected more out of our kids. And I think, and again, this is not the right answer, or it's just the answer that worked for us. We always expected more out of our kids. I look at a lot of my peers, other parents that have raised children, and I ask, why didn't you expect more from your kids? And I know that kind of goes to the question of, well, I wanted my kids to make their own decisions, do their own things. I didn't want to, get in their way. And I'm going to tell you, as a young child, meaning, under the age of 16, 17, I was surprised at some of the decisions that my kids would try to get away with. And I would realize it's not because they're trying to do something wrong or trying to put themselves in a bad position. It's because they just haven't thought this thing through. And so as a father, the best thing I can do for them is to expect more and to put my foot down and say no. And I think there's the next slide, maybe talking about that, the expectations that I had of my kids. And one of the phrases that I always use with my kids is, you're never going to achieve high unless you aim high. If you're constantly aiming low, you're only going to achieve low. And so this always expecting more of our kids, I think, help them to expect more of themselves. It actually helped with their self-esteem. It doesn't matter if I fail, I'm just going to keep aiming higher and higher because I know eventually I can get there.
Wasn't the way of raising, was it also to do with your Catholic faith and then showing others some way that your kids were raised nice and was, I'm not sure how to put this in English, I put it correctly, but was it also like to spread the faith, or was it just because your own thoughts about how to raise a kid?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you honestly, I didn't really think about it that much, but what I can tell you that where it came from was not so much my Catholic faith. It came from my Marine Corps experience. And that I joined the Marine Corps because I knew that they were going to expect a lot more out of me. And I thought, why can't I raise my children this way? If I just put my foot in and say, no, it's not okay that you're just making B's or C's in school. You can do much better, and I expect you to do better. Then they eventually started expecting more of themselves.
You have to know what your child is able to do, because
Right.
you can push it.
That is true. Yeah, yes.
Timothy was our straight C and B student,
Yeah.
because he couldn't make A in cut. But, you know, the fact that we saw him trying and studying, that was okay.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't losing off and.
And I think there was something else, I talked with the kids about, what do they want to do 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We used a phrase called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. What is it you want to do? Timothy wanted to be a physician, a doctor. And so I said, okay, so what are we going to start doing to start preparing you for that? And I think he probably went 3/4 of the way, and then he got married.
Join the Navy.
Joined the Navy, but that was part of the plan, is because he was hoping the Navy would help pay for that. And maybe he'll come back to that. But I always talk to the kids about what is a goal that you want to work towards, that we can start doing things now. It doesn't mean that you're going to make it tomorrow, but maybe it means that we do these little things to eventually get you to that. And all of the kids we would talk about, I know my daughter Hannah wanted to be an environmental lawyer.
I have no idea.
She
The Pelican Brief.
So everybody had their own thing. But just talking to your kids about goals and long-term goals, and then helping them to visualize that, and then expecting them to start working towards that, help them set it up themselves.
We actually had a couple of things that we did with the kids when they were smaller, and, prone to getting in trouble. I always told them, I said, look, I want you always to be good, but if you're going to be in public, be really, really good. So everyone has some really good brother. And that was kind of this small brainwashing thing. The other thing is when our kids are starting to go off to college, I would talk to other parents, and I was like, look, I told my kids, I don't want them doing the underage drinking. I don't want you doing drugs in college. I don't want you skipping classes, this whole, premarital sex thing. I want you guys to be good, because you're paying a lot of money for college. Do it. And my friends would tell me, they're like, you ever don't you get that any fun in college? I'm like, I did have fun. I said, you're not going to do anything illegal. I'm like, but didn't you have fun in college? And don't you expect them to live a little and do that? I said, no, I don't expect my kids to do the bad stuff. If I tell them that I want them to do the good stuff, hopefully they're going to try to please me. But if they fail, it's not going to be that big a deal, but I want them to know what I expect. And my friends are saying, well, I expect my kids to do all of that stuff. And one of my really good friends, I said, to me, you're setting your expectations so low, your kids are going to reach your expectations every time. And she looked at her and she's like, huh. So, we're still friends. And, my kids made some mistakes. I mean, one time Timothy called and said, they put, what was it, wine in the punch, and I drank it. And I said, okay, Tim, you're 20 years old. So that's just Tim.
Maybe one little break of 5 minutes.
Sure.
Because,
We can do that.
okay. Well, you can also take a break, those who are online. Okay, very good. Let's say 5 minutes and we come back.
Okay, sure. We'll do it like that.
Yeah.
Everybody back?
We can let people online.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Sure.
Before you married, did you talk about, I want for children, or is it something when
We-
you came
So
along?
we actually practice natural family planning, and that's one of the church approved ways to space your children. And so it's neat when you know a lot about natural family planning, you look at the woman's clock of what God has given her for the 28, 30 days for your cycle. And in the United States, when you're engaged, if you go to a Catholic engaged weekend, they teach the couples there, what it is, and we read books. And so there was no artificial birth control, but we did try to space the kids about every 2 or 3 years. Sometimes we succeeded, and sometimes,
but as far as before the wedding, before, talking about, do we want children? Yeah, we really did. In fact, I'll tell you, here's the funny thing. When we were in college together, we actually joked that we would be, that she would be my, if I have no other choice, wife. And last resort marriage. And we have been very good friends for 8 years before we got married. Once we decided to start dating, I think we did have some conversation about children, but it wasn't a lot.
It wasn't a number, it was just, we were just not going to start with it.
Yeah.
We also got married when we were about 28, so,
Yeah.
which is, I know it's not old here or not young, because my brothers all got married at 21, 22. Everyone was getting married, and I was 28. Yeah. So most of my brothers, my oldest brother has 7, second brother has 10 children, and the third brother is on they just had baby number 8. And so we only had 4, so we don't call us the black sheep, but we're definitely
we're the underperformers of the family. But we got married much later in life than they did. So.
And in this NFP, you felt free to choose when to be open to.
Well, and that's what, if you read Humani Vitae, who Paul said, every act of love between a husband and wife has to be open for life. So with NFP, in short, there's probably about, if you look at a woman's cycle being 30 days, there's probably about 10 days that you're abstaining. I told him you can live with 10 days without having a relationship with your wife. He survived.
And here's the thing too, I'm glad you brought that up, because we didn't actually, I don't think we talked about that last time.
We have a talk especially about this, but go ahead.
Yes, so I'll give you my take on it, So, one, I learned very quickly that it's the man's responsibility to keep track of things. All right, she can keep track of it, all right, but I have to know what's going on, just because it makes it easier. The other thing too that I found is that, I'll say that the first kid, there was no practicing NFP, all right? But once we started having children, it was kind of like, yeah, we need to kind of space them out a little bit. And I found that the periods that we were abstaining, actually, once that was over, there was more love involved. It was a way where we were waiting for each other. It was almost like we were on a dating again. And that kind of kept going, until finally to the point where we just weren't having kids anymore. But that was, I actually look at it as a plus, that it wasn't just a free-for-all anytime you wanted.
So he actually had a computer program spreadsheet, and he would have all my stuff on it. He would ask questions, and it kind of became kind of a cute game, because there's certain days, like I said, you're abstaining if you don't want to get pregnant. And he would ask me, he goes, hey, how about tonight? I said, 3 more days. He goes, woo-hoo, and so if you could do this for the kids, he would sit there and say, 3 days, and the kids would go, 3 days what, Dad? He does nothing. And so for the longest time, the kids didn't know what's going on, but then he would, because he had the notes, he would come to me and go, see you tonight. I'm like, people are here. So it just, I kind of got a little romance, but it was just, we did the NFP thing, where we read the book, charted, and the onus was on him to keep the charts.
Yeah. So. And I'm sure you'll be getting much more. I think there's another class coming up on that.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure. So I'll read this one here. So this is my son Timothy with his 3rd boy. He's got 3 boys with Lainey. Dad taught me to be a man, but Mom taught me to be a gentleman. From Dad, I learned how to sacrifice for my family and how to defend my family. There are times when raising my voice is necessary, but never my fist. Mom taught me to be a gentleman by showing me how to live like a man, but from the point of view of a woman. She talked to me about talking to women and being kind to them. So I'll tell you, I was so glad when Timothy wrote this, because he was so hard to raise. Timothy was a very, very focused, very intense. That's a good word. A very intense young man growing up. And there were plenty of times that I had to raise my voice with Timothy. And, you know, it probably scandalize everybody. There were plenty of times that Timothy got spanked too. I was spanked growing up. And it was always, I always had to take a breath beforehand. Now, I know things are changing and discipline changes. And so, you know, that's something that you guys will have to find your own course in what is an appropriate discipline, right? But Timothy was my discipline problem growing up. And one of the books that's on here that I read was Let Boys Be Boys. It's by Meg Meekum, right? And she also writes a very good one, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. She's not Catholic, right? She's a pediatrician in the United States. And she wrote from 30 years of observing young children coming in and talking to them about what is it you enjoy, what are you doing? You know, she's a doctor, all right? And so she wrote these books, and the book Let Boys Be Boys tells a really good story about this young boy where she asked, what do you enjoy doing? And the young boy said, well, I enjoy going to work with my father. And she asked him, well, what do you enjoy? She goes, well, he cuts down trees. He's a lumberjack. And so I get in the truck with him and we go in the morning and Dad will get me some hot chocolate and a donut. And then I'll sit there in the car all day because it's too dangerous for me to be out there while he's cutting trees. And I'll watch him. And at the end of the day, we drive home. And Meg she's like, well, why is that the most enjoyable day? Why is it that that's what you enjoy doing? And the boy, in all seriously, looked at her and said, because I'm spending time with my dad. And that really opened up my eyes to boys need to spend, and girls, but boys need to spend time with their fathers. And so what I finally found is activities that Timothy and I could do together. We tried baseball. Timothy's a little uncoordinated, so that didn't work. Soccer didn't work, but I eventually got him into a scouting program. And I really enjoy being in the outdoors and backpacking and camping. And Timothy, it's like it flipped the switch on him. And he enjoyed the outdoors so much, he just grew into this great young man that then, as he was older in high school, started mentoring the younger scouts because he enjoyed it so much. But spending that time with them, I think, was the thing that was important. And so, yes for boys, yes for girls also. Fathers, don't discount the time that you spend with your children. The mothers are going to spend time, but they really crave that extra time with the fathers. And I even do this with the grandkids now. I'll take one grandkid and say, hey, let's go down to the store. And they get to spend time with grandfather, which, well, we'll get into that later. My grandfather name is Happy. So, but spending quality time with the kids, I think, is a really good thing, a good takeaway from this page. Miss anything on your notes?
I'm surprised Timothy survived.
Oh my gosh. There were a lot of times that, I didn't think Timothy would survive childhood.
And he's the most wonderful son. I mean, even in high school, he would, whenever I'd come to do work over there or something, he was always the kid who would come give me a hug and a kiss, say, bye, Mom, love you. And I'm like, you're doing this in front of all your friends. And he had no qualms with that. I'm like, okay. But yeah, he was intense. That's good.
So this is Hannah. We haven't talked about Hannah yet. Hannah's our middle daughter.
Can they see the screen?
Father, do you want someone from online to read this?
Maybe. Sylvia, can you read the screen of Hannah? Just what Hannah
All right,
said?
yeah, I move this one. Yeah. Oh, to read it loud.
Read it aloud.
Okay. Hannah, we were not dumped into the church for our education regarding our religion. You all took your roles as parents seriously when you educated us as Catholics. And I think that is something so lost now among families. Education of the family is not the church's responsibility, but the responsibility of parents. They vowed to undertake this when they baptized their children. Not being part of a child's religious education makes the children the sole person responsible for their own faith. And at the age of 15, 16, I was not equipped mentally to take charge of my faith.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we were involved with their religious education all the way through until they graduated high school. I think Laura took care or volunteered at the church and taught the communion, so it would be second and third grade communion and confession time. And then I volunteered and taught during the middle school period. And we were teaching more than just our children. I mean, we were teaching other children at the church. But we did that because we wanted to make sure that our children were getting a solid foundation in the Catholic faith. And even when our children were not in one of our classes, as they were moving, from year to year, when they got back from religious education, we would ask them questions. So what did you learn today? What is it, do you have any questions about what the teacher said? Or what about, I can tell you that probably the most questions that we fielded was when they got into high school. And in high school, our church was doing a peer teaching thing where the kids themselves would study something and then try to teach it to the rest of the kids. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids would get the Catholic faith wrong. And so our kids would come home and they would say, hey, well, this is what they said today. And we would have to go, no, that's not exactly the way it is. We would have to talk to them. It actually became a problem a little bit later on. We decided to stop with the kids doing this peer teaching, and we decided to do religious education at home. And we actually had several families that joined us, and we did about 7 or 8 kids, and we used what we thought were some very good Catholic books. Scott Hahn. Yeah, he's got a religious education series called the Didache series. But we also use Faith and Life, which I think is used here for the religious education. So we recognize that as parents, it was our responsibility to educate the children, not the church's responsibility, not the school's responsibility. In fact, we had a saying that our kids even use today that we will not let the school system stand in the way of our children's education. There were plenty of times that we pulled our kids out of school and we would do things ourselves as a family.
Some of that was like a holiday of obligation. We have like the Assumption of Mary being August 15th. Well, sometimes it's a Wednesday or a Thursday. But we would go to school and check our children out, and we were told the kids aren't going to be excused. It's like, it's okay. They would, miss some points or whatever, but we took our children. That's something might be going on that evening, but we just, it wasn't just the education of the church that we would take away from the school. It was just, we wanted to do things as a family. And sometimes we're like, school's important, but being with the family or going to grandma's funeral or, going to someone's wedding out of state, is important to us. And we take them on.
And the kids especially liked it when we would take them to Disney World and not have them in school. We only did that 1 year. We had good tickets. But
one of the things I also, as a teacher, I taught for 30 years in the church, the community kids. And I can't tell you how many of the kids, because 30 years, I had a lot of kids, they would come to my class and we're talking 8-year-olds, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and the kids couldn't do their prayers. They didn't know the most basic prayers. They could tell me 20 Pokemon names. They could name those turtles, the Ninja Turtle guys. They could do their ABCs. They could do country lines. But I would send those to the parents, and I went to the teacher in the 1st grade, and I said, "Could you please send a letter out that said the parents need to start working with their kids?" I mean, it's plain that the parents are teaching the kids to do sight words and ABCs and numbers and things. It's like they kind of dropped off on just the prayers that you would think that you would say at that time with the children. So again, the primary teacher is God's going to ask you when you get up to heaven, how did you help your children? You know, did you just turn them loose and let them make their own decisions about everything, or did you help them form their faith and form their conscience? You know, that's one of the things we require as parents. So, you know, teach your kids.
Sure.
I just would like to ask you, if it's a difference between when you raise your children and raising your grandchildren, because nowadays it's very difficult to raise your children in faith
Right.
when at school, even if it's Catholic,
Mhm.
nobody believes in God, not
Yep.
even the teachers and stuff. And you hope for something, but there's nothing that comes out from school. You cannot take your children out of school or to raise them in a Catholic way. Or not, I'm not bringing them, I have a problem
Right.
with school. And I see a huge challenge as parents because it's just like nowadays is the world is
Just like that.
it's upside down.
Yes.
And then you're confronted
Mhm.
with the society that is really against God's spirit. That's when you realize a lot of people thinking like you do, not like theirs.
Right.
But do you see that difference? Because it's not like before. Like today's a huge challenge, and like what's I don't know what's your name. I don't know what your name is. I have been raised Catholic, but I think like when your parents, it's always a challenge to learn how to do it nowadays. Everything has changed. And for all us, it's just like a challenge how to do it. How can we just guide our children in the right path?
Right.
It's very easy that they get a fast way.
It's going to be hard. And I mean, I look at what's going on right now and I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's harder now than it was when we were there, but I think it was harder when we were raising kids than when our parents were raising us. I think it's just continuously getting harder because we're continuously, the world is becoming more and more secular. They're further and further away from God. What I will say is that don't discount your children, especially when they're younger, looking up to you and wanting to emulate you, be like you. And that as a husband and wife, if you live your faith, and I don't mean just, it's a private thing between me and my wife. I mean, live it to the point where your children notice the difference. I think that's probably going to be the biggest help for them because eventually, like the thing that Monica said, she started seeing the difference. She would go to her friends, and her friends wouldn't help out, and they backed off their parents. And I'm sure not all of them were. I know who her friends were, and I know who the parents were. But she noticed that there were differences, and she would look at it, and she would start making up her own mind. She goes, my parents, compared to this or the way that we were raised. And so don't discount that your kids are not going to they're not going to notice that difference. And the other thing that I would say too is that ask your children about what they're learning in school. And when they say, well, this is what my teacher said, if it's not in line with what the Catholic faith says, then explain to them what the Catholic faith is. The Catholic Church teaches this, and this is why this is right or wrong. And have that conversation. I think probably, in my opinion, the worst thing to do would be just to wash your hands and say the school is going to take care of educating my children. And that's not the way that Catholic parenthood is supposed to be.
And I think in addition to what you said, I was raised in a pretty big family. I had 31 cousins, and we were always at grandma and grandpa's house, for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. And having a family who's Catholic supports you. When we first got married, two of my brothers were already married, we all had kids together. Well, every Tuesday night they would come into our house and eat pizza and watch Star Trek, And so we would always make sure that our kids, had not just their Catholic cousins around them, but Catholic friends. And you might have to go the route that if you don't have family living here, or if you don't have relatives who are Catholic, you find Catholic friends who are having kids with your kids, and you're like, hey, we started a Rotary group at my little, when we moved to Austin, and it was like 3 women started it. By the time we finished a year later, there was 15 women We would meet this park, we would get the kids snacks, send them to the playground, that they would was fenced, and then we would sit there and play the grocery. We were interrupted all the time. We got our little time, they didn't have to listen to us, and we got the kids, and it was just kind of a neat thing. And none of us were related, and it's like, so it kind of became like my church family. And I look forward to seeing it because, girls need girls, and, he's not my girlfriend, but the ladies were, they were watching the kids like me, and we were going through the whole thing. So you do want the sense of community because just you and your husband raising your kids in your own little bubble, it's not what you can do anymore. But, you have to try. Oh, so this priest is actually one of my college roommates. When I went to a Catholic college in Virginia, and this is Father Tom, and he actually married Philip and I a couple of years.
He was a deacon at the time.
And he's been a family friend, and he would actually come to my parents' house and work on the farm because he loved tractors. And when Hannah was getting married, she called her father and she was calling him to come to Texas, and so he came.
And so this is actually a good segue because, including Catholicism in your circle of friends is important too. Laura talked a little bit about, having the rosary group, but don't also discount the religious. There were many times that we would invite priests over for dinner and they would have dinner with our kids. I will tell you that our kids never behaved any better than when they were priests sitting there at the table with them. It was like, wow, I wish our kids could act this good at the table all the time. All right.
All I'm going to do is just say, Father, would you bring your skull? If you want to go to confession,
but introducing your kids to the religious life, whether you expect them to or not to become religious themselves, just introducing them to that and letting them know that this is a family. We have our family that we're related by blood. There's also our Catholic family. And these are our brothers and our sisters in the Catholic faith. And they're here to help you also. None of our kids have joined either the priesthood or become nuns, although Monica is still single. I don't think Monica's going to be becoming a nun, but they were raised with Catholic priests, with nuns, and with other religious around them. And they didn't have a problem talking with them. Hannah was probably our most talkative. And in fact, she would love to play jokes on the priests. So this is actually our parish priest in Texas. She would play jokes on him. And one day, it was actually after confirmation, and the bishop was there. And she runs up to the priest, Father Evans, and she says, Father, she says, do you know how many animals of each kind Moses took on the ark?
You guys have an answer? How many animals of each kind did Moses bring on the ark? What's your answer? Okay.
Two. Yeah, that's what Father said.
Was it two?
It was two. This is in front of the bishop, and Hannah goes, Father, Moses didn't take any animals on the ark. Father Evans turned so bright red.
We had no idea she was going to do this.
So that is how comfortable our kids were around priests and nuns, that they felt that they could interact with them just like their brothers and their sisters. And so I encourage you to include your church family in your family. Make it like that where the priest, where the kids just feel that that's an extension of their natural family.
And I vouch, priests are very good eaters. They're not picky. They eat well. We had Father come over. And one of the things Father did is came over for dinner, and within a day or two, we were teaching this class. He was getting Philip to read at mass.
But that was not planned because the couple who would give this moved back to their country, and I needed an emergency. And here you go.
It's very difficult to help priests now.
So this was kind of the, all the kids had mentioned this, and so we thought we'd throw that in. There's So these are some of the priests that in Sydney that we had over for dinner. Of course, Father Tom is there. He's in Virginia. And then you actually went to college with these two nuns, didn't you?
Yes, that was at the same college I was with Father, and I was a little bit older when I went to this Catholic college, and probably about 6 months into being there, like these 6 girls left a weekend. They just went away on a weekend, and they didn't tell me. And they came back, and I go, where did you go? Oh, we went on a nun run. Well, a nun run is where you go to a convent and you kind of like see
You visit, yeah.
And then I go, well, you guys didn't invite me. We all started laughing. Laura, you're not nun material. So that was kind of a joke. The priest there in the middle up there between us, that's Father Paul Grant, and he's Opus Dei.
Yes.
He's Opus Dei father.
I met him once a long time ago.
Okay, well, so Father Tom, the Virginian, when he found out he was coming to Virginia, he goes, you gotta look up Father Paul Grant. He's in Sydney. He goes, you'll love him. He goes, invite him over. And so we did. We had never met Father Grant. And
Father Paul Grant was a rugby player.
okay.
Professional rugby player before.
Well, one of his other interesting things, his father is still alive in Australia. He's like 97 years old. So Father was
We had him over, what, about 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And a very, very well-read individual. We would start talking about American history or World War II history, and Father was just, I mean, he was there, and he would talk about books that he had read. Just a very, very smart, intellectual, very good conversation with him.
Yeah, he wouldn't talk about American history.
Yeah.
He probably knew more than we did.
So this is Hannah. This is our, the child that when Timothy found out we were having a girl, he cried. So Timothy and Hannah have pretty much been at each other, all growing up. So Hannah this was a picture where she was accepted into the Disney World internship and actually worked at Disney World for 4 or 5 months. Yep. So
maybe Emanuela, would you like, or
Yes, I can read if you want.
read this?
So looking back, I realized how many parents among my friends and in our family checked out of their children's lives once they graduated high school or even before that. I found it so annoying how often the two of you were checking in on me or questioning my whereabouts, but I know now that it was not so much that you wanted to control my life, but more because you were keeping me accountable.
I did that.
yes.
Hannah was in college, and a couple of times I knew she was having fun, and I would just call her on a Sunday and say, "Oh, I said, what class did you go to?" And I could hear the eyes roll into his mom. Anyway, it was probably just her first semester, but it was just, just make sure that your children are, staying on the right path.
Yeah, I would say, no matter how old your children are, you're still their parents. Laura talked about a little earlier where she, kind of went in and talked to Tim about something that he had done, and Tim was 25 years old. My oldest daughter, Stephanie, 31 years, still calls me to ask my opinion about things. Yeah, what do you think about this? Is this going to be a good idea? And I've never said, you're an adult, figure it out. I always give her my opinion. Now, whether she follows it or not, she's an adult. But I'm glad that our children are still talking to us and asking us our opinion because we're still their parents. And one thing that you can take this either moms or dads, but in high school, I didn't really talk a lot with the dads, but there was definitely a mother's network. And mothers would call and go, "Hey, Laura, did you know that Timothy did something or other today at school? Or I thought your kids were supposed to be at school during lunch. Why did I see them down at the park?" And the kids would get home and we would go, "So, how was the park today? How did you know?" So don't discount talking to other parents and saying, hey, you keep track of my kids, I'll help you keep track of yours. You call me, let me know what they're doing. I think our kids just recently started figuring out how we knew all this stuff that was going on.
It's the parent code.
Yes, you definitely use that. And something happened recently where one of the kids called and said, I finally figured out how you found out about.
You know what, I think my kids taught me how to play dumb.
Okay. So even today, we hold our kids accountable. You know, we expect expect more of your kids, call them, ask them questions. I don't care if they're 30 years old, they're still my child. And I'm still going to, look out for their best interests and hold them accountable when I don't think they're doing the right thing. And that was all the good things our kids said about us. And we did give them the option to say bad things. I don't know whether they're just being nice to us because we're old and senile, or whether there really wasn't anything bad.
Some of these books my kids recommended, I haven't read all of these.
Okay, good.
But yeah, some of my kids are looking at this one, I haven't read that.
So for the people here, we've already handed out a list, which is these resources. And I think, Father, you have these presentations that we sent you.
If you haven't changed it, I have.
Okay, then if you don't have, then we can, or we can send it. So these are all books that were recommended either by our kids or that we found good. So I've talked about Meg Meeker. She's a pediatrician from the US, and she wrote Boys Should Be Boys. That's the one. And then Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, I didn't read until my girls were already older. And I was very happy to find that just out of a natural wanting to protect my daughters, I had done a lot of what she said in there. One thing I hadn't mentioned is that for my daughters, we had a rule for dating that nobody was allowed to date our daughter until they had come to the house and asked my permission. And at first, the girls were a little put off by that. Actually, they thought it was cute when they were younger, right?
They weren't dating until they were 16.
And, well, I tried to convince them they couldn't date until they were 22. And at first, I had them going, but that changed pretty quickly. And there was a little bit of pushback on that, but I was really insistent on that. And so the young boys would come, and I would do okay, well, let's have a talk. And I'm from Texas. Everybody here knows that I'm from Texas. The day that the boys were coming over was always the day that I thought was the best to clean my rifles.
Yeah.
And so even, so my daughter Hannah, her husband Brad still remembers coming up to the house, and I'm in the front yard cleaning the shotgun.
There was 2 shotguns with him.
Yeah. So the point being there is that as fathers, not only do we have a responsibility to protect our wives, we have a responsibility to protect our children. And so there is nothing better than a father putting the fear of God into a young man to make sure that he keeps his hands off your daughter and he's respectful, and then setting the rules and telling the young boy, I'm not telling my daughter these rules, I'm telling you the rules, and as man to man, I'm expecting you to obey my rules. And rules such as, I was not vague, I didn't say, I want my daughter home by 11. I would say, I want my daughter walking through the door at 11 o'clock. And so very clear rules. So this was one of the things that Meg Meeker talks about strong fathers, strong daughters, is that daughters have a bond with their father. And if you expect more, if you're strong, if you hold your daughters accountable, they will grow up to be strong daughters. All right. And I didn't know that. That was just my attempt to protect my daughters. Years later, I find out from my daughters that they actually used you got to talk to my dad first to put off boys that you didn't really want to date. Because they knew if they said that, the boy would go, I'm gonna go talk to your dad. Right? And that's the one you didn't want anyway. But the ones that were willing to go, okay, I'll go talk to your dad, that was like okay, now he's got some potential. Because he's willing to stand up and go talk to my dad, man to man. Right? So anyway, that's a good one. Meg Meeker, strong fathers, strong daughters.
We actually had at least two of the young men, but they didn't very defend, but two of the young men told our daughters, it's like, you know, I was really afraid of coming home to your dad. He goes, but now that I did it, he goes, I appreciate it. And he goes, and I know that your father loves you very much. And that was, you know, our daughters are like, oh, he does.
What other ones on here did you want to?
The St. Paul Center.
Oh, that's right. So the St. Paul Center, Scott Hahn, he writes a lot of really good books. He started the St. Paul Center. It is a center for Catholic studies. But what I like about it is it's not very theological, it's more down to earth. It's much easier to read a lot of his writings and a lot of the stuff for the other people that write for the St. Paul Center. They also have a series of videos that you can watch where he takes some of his better books and then walks you through a series of like 10 videos explaining it. So some of the best ones are a video series called Genesis to Jesus, where he takes the Bible and he explains salvation history starting from Genesis all the way up to when Jesus came, and explains how, you know, Adam and Eve were there to explain the family. And then you go on to Noah, the extended family, and he explains each step of it, eventually getting to David and why all of these pieces of the Old Testament are important and build all the way up to Jesus, which is the last covenant. Each one of these are covenants with man until finally the final covenant. So Genesis to Jesus is a good one. We just watched the Mary one, which is Hail Holy Queen, was the video series. And it's an explanation of why do we venerate Mary? Because Catholics don't worship Mary, we venerate Mary. All right, and there's a big difference, and a lot of our Protestant friends don't know that difference. And if you're sitting here going, well, what is the difference? I'm not going to explain it. I'm going to say, go watch the videos. And the way to do this is if you give them $10 a month, you get access to all their videos for free. Otherwise, it costs a little bit more money. You guys can go take a look at the prices. Shipping's a little hard if you're in Europe, but they do have a PDF version of a lot of their books, so that you can also do that. And there's another one that we enjoy, Faith of Our Fathers, I think, which was about the early church fathers and how they interpreted a lot of the Old and New Testament and how they tied it all together. All of this, very interesting. And this is more for your growth, but my kids watch these also. And we usually try to do this especially during Lent. We'll watch these during Advent also, kind of as a family. We did that before when we had the kids, but now we do it just my wife and I.
Maybe, does anyone want to share something or ask questions? Feel free. Betty and Yuri, Maralina and company.
Well, what I would like to say is that many things that have been mentioned here is not only applying to children, but also to the couple. They're very, very nice words like to participate, to love better, the contribution, the protection, you know, that is now today we're talking about the children, but it's also for the couple, for one to the other one. That is for me very nice words I want to say.
Thank you. And I will say, you know, it's looking back, like I said, you know, time has a way of helping you with your memory. You look back, and to tell you the truth, I only remember a lot of the either fun things or the happy things. don't remember a lot of the suffering, but I'll guarantee you there was a lot of suffering there together. Especially as we were looking at our kids and going, how are they going to make it in the world? And I think just, living your faith and putting your trust in God and really showing that to your kids, I think is probably the best thing that we could have done. And we did that without really knowing that that was going to be what was going to work.
Anybody else?
And you're here.
So all of our kids are grown now. And so kind of what are we doing? We are, and if you don't know what this means, I'll explain it. We're spending the inheritance before the kids get it. The inheritance is the money that the kids get from their parents when we pass away. We are trying our best to make sure they don't have anything. We're pretty much enjoying being with each other now that the kids are on their own and raising their kids. And I guess what I'm getting at here is when we got married, we had children very quickly. And so we didn't have a lot of alone time early in our marriage. For us, we were quickly focusing on raising kids and having and being a family. And there wasn't a lot of just us. And now our kids are grown. We're done with our work. Now we're enjoying our life. And I'm not sure if that's the best way. Maybe we could have put off having kids and enjoyed our time up front. But I think that it worked out, at least for us, a lot better this way, in that, we appreciate each other more. We've got a lot more shared history. Our kids are taken care of, and now we're having fun and making sure our kids don't have any of our money when we pass.
Well, and that's the short takeaway is during your married life, the kids are going to come and they are going to sometimes drain you. Always make time that you have with each other, because if you don't work on the relationship during the marriage and the kids go off to college, I've met many of my friends who are like, I just couldn't stand it. I didn't know, and the marriage was hard. So, at this point, I can say I actually like them a lot more now than when we first were married. And so that's good. It's a good thing.
And what are these hobbies that you have there? Did you already explain it?
You notice they're all outdoor.
Okay. So I don't know why. My wife likes going outdoors with me. I enjoy being in the outdoors. We scuba dive. The bottom left side there, we decided to actually climb the Sydney Bridge all the way up to the top. And so that's us that's Sydney in the background. We're up on the very top of the bridge. The top picture is us out in the Blue Mountains in Australia. And I think that other one is in Malta, is it?
I have no idea.
Yeah, and then the bottom one is us scuba diving. I'm very, very happy when I'm underwater.
Because I don't get to talk.
Not the same for you, Laura.
Okay.
So we picked up some hobbies and we're just trying to have fun with each other now. When we do get back with the family, we do our very best to spoil the grandkids. Even when our kids tell us no, they can't. We're the parents. You can't tell me no. I get to spoil the grandkids. I remember the first time my oldest daughter, Stephanie, realized that the two oldest girls came down to tell us good night. They were already in their pajamas. They had already brushed their teeth. They go, good night, Happy. And I give them a hug and I say, here's some chocolate. And they run upstairs and I hear Stephanie yelling, where did you get the chocolate? Happy gave it to us. So there is fun at the end because then you get to have fun with the grandkids.
So what are the most essentials for you to stay strong together in this kind of children? You already told spending time together. Are there any other things which due to?
Now, one of the things, he really likes the outdoors. And so there were several times when he wanted to go do a 10 to 12 day hike, like 98 miles. He asked me if I wanted to go. I said, no. I said, thank you. And that would be his alone time. That's when he would go, he would go with, maybe some guys and stuff. But, I did stuff with my girlfriends, but, basically once we started the family, we were pretty much with each other. Rarely do we take a vacation away from the kids. In fact, I take vacations for I think every 4 or 5 years with the kids. We might sneak off for a weekend, but we really try to keep each other in line because again, when the children are gone, you're kind of stuck with each other. So you better like who you pick now, because 30 years down the road.
That's actually a good point. I mean, we did vacations as a family with the kids, 8 hours in the car before they had TVs in the cars. All right, and we would make sure the kids would have games and things to do, and we figured out who could sit next to who. But we also realized that to be happy, we didn't have to always spend time with each other all the time. There were times that I would take off and go camping for a weekend, and she would stay home. Or she would take off and go down to go visit her parents, and I would keep the kids at the house. And so, finding out that balance where you have your romantic getaway for the weekend time, where you have I'll take the kids, you go see your parents for the weekend, or you take the kids and I'm gonna go out and look at trees for the weekend. Find out what makes sense for you guys, and don't be afraid to spend a little time apart, because that just adds to when you get back together, it's okay. I'm feeling much better. Let's do things together. Everybody needs breaks from their spouse every once in a while. Everybody needs breaks from the kids. And then there's sometimes that you just need to do things together as a family, and you need to figure out what that rhythm is on your own for your family. So we're doing a lot more together now. I'm trying to think if we've done anything separate since the kids grew up. No, I think we're doing a lot together now. Oh, well, yeah, I like rappelling, abseiling, and she won't do that. She's scared of heights. So I do that in Sydney, and she wouldn't go. But she did make me call once I was done to make sure that I hadn't fallen and hurt myself. So I would call her and let her know I was done. She likes to sing, I don't, so she did flash mobs, and I wouldn't go. So yeah, we still do some things separate. So find that mix and just figure out what works. Any other questions?
Any ideas of your own or suggestions?
I think it's interesting because a lot of the points you bring up, I was raised non-religious, but the thing with respecting people who come over, having chores in the house, always making sure that you tell about your day, having dinners together, that kind of stuff, that was very much present in our upbringing. So I think in that regard, I very much would fit in with this style of education. I think more the question for us too would be what role religion would play in the upbringing itself. And I think as far as the upbringing itself goes,
And it's very important.
Yeah. And for you guys, I would definitely recommend the Meg Meeker books because she talks from a medical standpoint as to what she's seen has been the most impact for raising children that are that are well behaved, that are independent. And she does touch a little bit on the religion, but mainly from the viewpoint of setting boundaries and expecting the children to live within boundaries. So you're going to get a lot of what we talked about without the religion from Meg Meeker and how well that is with raising children. If you want to rate, and if you want to include the Catholic part, which I would wholly advise that you do, but this is how you guys need to figure out, then the other books are going to help you to bring the religion part in. But Meg will definitely talk about what she sees as the best ways of raising children by just setting natural boundaries and expectations and what it is that you want, the kid should be raised as. So.
Betty and Yuri? anything to say eventually?
Well, that you have a huge family, so you raise 4 kids, and then you have how many grandchildren? 5, 7? So it's a huge family. Well,
Yeah, 7 and 1 on the way.
right. Well, it's a big one. Nowadays, well, there's still big families out there. Yeah. But
And
4, you
Marina?
don't see that much.
And company, do you have anything to share or to say? You have to unmute. Yeah.
No, we have nothing to add.
Thank you. Okay.
Let me address one thing, that it's a lot to manage 4 kids. And we only have 4 kids, and several of her siblings have more than that. I will tell you that after the second, it's kind of 1 more, 2 more, it doesn't really add much more to the mix. Raising 1 kid's easy because you always know who broke the vase, right? Raising 2 is a little harder because now you're not quite sure. And then after that, it's just, well, now I don't know whether it's 1, 2, or 3, or just 1 and 2. One thing that we did learn though is that as the kids get older, they become a help with the younger kids. And we expected our older kids to help us take care of the younger kids. Timothy was very good at changing diapers by the time he was 13 years old. And he would have in fact, not only Timothy, but all the other nephews, the girls, when we would get all the family together, the girls would spend time in the kitchen helping out with the aunts. And the young boys would pick up all the babies and take care of the babies. They were on toddler patrol. So all the very little kids were taken care of by the nephews because all of us dads were outside barbecuing and drinking beer. See?
Which book is that?
Yeah. That's the book, according to Philip.
That's the book of life.
That's right. But the point there is that Timothy was perfectly ready, or at least I thought he was, by the time he got to the point of having kids. He was an expert at changing diapers. He knew about how to chase down little kids. He knew about being a father. And so in the larger families, you find that it just naturally evolves that the older kids start taking care of the younger kids. Even just in our Ford, Stephanie was nicknamed by the younger kids as the little mother because she was always looking after, especially Monica, the youngest. And Timothy, God bless Timothy, Timothy actually gave Stephanie a Mother's Day card one year to make her mad. Right? So the order, though. I'm sorry? It did work. Oh, it definitely worked. It punched Stephanie's buttons to no end. But the older kids do, they emulate you. So they want to help. They want to take care of the little kids. They want to, and so, by the time you get the 3rd one, after that, it's just kind of just another one in the house. So don't discount larger families. Like I said, we got started a little bit late, but other brothers, all have bigger families.
Well, thank you very much. And our best regards to everybody there online. And thanks for joining. And have you thought about the possible dinner? Do you think it's appropriate or better not? What do you think?
Me, frankly, I mean, in a normal situation, normal world, because I would think it's an excellent idea. But now with the COVID and that, I'm particularly not, not really. I would go to the workshop. We will go to the workshop.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can do is, let's say, let's wait a few weeks. Maybe in one of the final sessions, if things get better, and then we can just organize it. Do you think it would be a good idea? Not in this coming week, but another Wednesday evening? Okay.
Yeah, that could be good. Yeah.
Okay, then then we will not have a dinner this coming Thursday because The coming session is this week, not Wednesday as usual, but Thursday, because there was something special on Wednesday that we decided to move it to Thursday. And there will be no dinner, but the worship will begin indeed at 8 p.m. Okay, now all the best, and we're going to close the meeting, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I?